I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. So a group representing all of the Supreme Court justices in all of the states and territories just filed an impassioned amicus brief, or a friend of the court brief, to the United States Supreme Court, telling the United States Supreme Court that what's called the independent state legislature doctrine, or the independent state legislature theory, is anathema to the Constitution, is anathema to checks and balances, is something that should not be accepted at all by the radical Supreme Court, and would basically destroy the checks and balances in place in our government, and is anti-democratic. And so what is this independent state legislature theory? Well, it's not being talked about enough, but is probably one of the biggest dangers right now to our democracy. And the Supreme Court has agreed to take up a case called Moore versus Harper that pushes the independent state legislature theory. And this theory or doctrine basically says that as it relates to federal elections, that state legislatures can do whatever they want. Doesn't matter what the governors say or what the state courts say. So if it's a Republican state legislature, they can decide on their own who wins elections, how they want to gerrymander, what they want to do, and courts have no say, even if the constitutions of a state say the courts have a say, even if the laws have, say that the courts have a say, even if basic principles of court judicial autonomy and power says that courts should be able to determine the constitutionality. This doctrine says, nope. Legislatures get to pick who they want. It doesn't matter what people vote on. It doesn't matter what courts say. It's a very, very dangerous doctrine. And for a long time, people thought, legal observers thought, this is an anti-democratic or anti-democracy doctrine, small d. This is an insane doctrine. This would completely destroy democracy. There's no way this could be real. There's no way this is a thing. This is some bizarre anti-democratic fascist theory. No one will ever take it up. Bring in Donald Trump. He appoints radical Supreme Court justices that now have 6-3. Well, the radical Supreme Court has agreed to hear a case in either its next term or the term after that, but coming soon, regarding the independent state legislature doctrine and whether it should apply. And let me give you the background of how this case made its way to the Supreme Court, and you can see just how dangerous it is and why all the Supreme Court justices from the state courts filed this brief to the federal level Supreme Court saying, this is insane. Do not rule in favor of the state legislature doctrine. You're going to destroy the autonomy of states and the state court system. So what happened was in 2020, there was the census. And as a result of the census, the Republicans in North Carolina decided that they were going to engage in extreme partisan gerrymandering in the state of North Carolina. Now, North Carolina has a constitutional provision, an anti-partisan gerrymandering position. And so after the Republican legislature proposed this unlawful gerrymandered map, it was there was a lawsuit that was filed that worked its way to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court ruled and struck down the gerrymandered map. One of the arguments that was advanced by the Republican legislature, however, is, court, you don't even have the jurisdiction. You don't have the right to make decisions. We as the legislature are the only people who get to decide Constitution, independent state legislature doctrine. And the Supreme Court basically ruled that's utterly insane. That would be abhorrent to all of constitutional provisions and separations of powers. Of course, courts and state courts should be able to determine and have a say and not leave this power unchecked. So what happened? The legislature appeals to the United States Supreme Court, and the United States Supreme Court says, we're going to hear this case. We want to rule on the independent state legislature doctrine. So what is this even rooted in? Well, Article 1, Section 4 of the Constitution says the following. It's called the Election Clause, and it says the times, place, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. That's what the Constitution says. So mostly everybody reads that to say that the state legislature can set like literally the location and the time, but that this clause doesn't mean that the state legislature can go unchecked, that there is no checks and balances on them, that they could decide whatever they want to do. And it doesn't matter what the court system says or what the governor says, that just state legislatures are an entity in and of itself. But what the radical Republicans and the extreme Federalist Society people have pushed this doctrine of independent state legislative theory. This means that state legislatures are supreme. They control whatever they want to control. And what's very frightening about this doctrine as well is how it can be applied to state electors as well. And so what many people believe is if you apply the independent state legislature doctrine and say that that's the law of the land, all of these Republican states that wanted to throw out the results of the 2020 election and say the popular vote doesn't matter, let's just decide whatever in the world Trump tells us to do, let's just appoint Trump as president, the popular vote doesn't matter, elections don't matter, the state legislature will decide. There's no even point to do a vote. That's where the logical extension of the state legislator doctrine would be. Now, there are some say, oh, we'll never get that far. It just relates to gerrymandering issues where state legislatures can say courts can't regulate how we gerrymander, or courts can't regulate how we control our maps. But really, that's what we should trust that they're going to do? Of course not. Of course, what they're after here is not just to do unlawful, discriminatory gerrymandering. That's one. But they want to throw out the popular vote and say that it's the legislatures who decide, the votes of the people don't matter. And so to the extent the Supreme Court rules in favor of this independent state legislature doctrine, our very democracy is in peril, because there is no more vote in the states. It's just what the state legislatures decide. So, if there's a Republican legislature, because they're the ones who want to overturn free and fair elections, they'll just simply say, like they've tried to say when they submitted fake electors to Congress, they'll say, hey, our fake electors are real electors now. Independent state legislature doctrine, here is what we want to do. We don't care what the popular vote says. We decide this. And there goes our democracy. And so in the breaking news that just happened is that every single Supreme Court justice for the states, so the Supreme Court justices who sit on top of their judicial system for the states, not the federal level, they submitted this amicus brief. And we've talked about amicus briefs on prior YouTube videos, so you can go and check out what that means. But they submitted one to the Supreme Court, this brief saying, the independent state legislature doctrine would overturn all principles of law. We'd lose our democracy if that was the case. This is very dangerous, and do not rule in favor of the independent state legislature doctrine. The problem is we have a radical, extreme Supreme Court right now that is controlled by people who are anti-democratic, who are pro-fascist. And so the question ultimately is, what do we do? And what is our hope? How do we get out of this? Well, we can hope and cross our fingers that things change, but that's not exactly a good strategy. Democrats need to win the midterms. Democrats need to keep the Senate. Democrats need to control the House. They need to keep control, and we need to pass sweeping reforms to stop this, to stop fascism from happening. And if we pick up seats in the Senate and if we hold the House, we can do that. But that's how fragile this is, right? You may not have even heard about this case. You may have heard people talk about the independent state legislature doctrine, but that's how dangerous it is, as I've just explained it and laid it out. That's why all these state Supreme Court justices just filed this brief. And so this case may be heard in the next term or the term after that, but it will be heard before the 2024 election. And it's possible that before the 2024 election, that the Supreme Court in its current form, unless action's taken, unless Democrats can control the House and the Senate, and make sweeping change and make important action to preserve our democracy, they could simply say elections don't matter in states anymore. Independent state legislature doctrine. The fact that this clause says time, place, and manner means that state legislatures can do whatever the hell they want. That's obviously not what it says, but that's how extreme it is. And this is the same Supreme Court that overturned Roe v. Wade. But I don't want you to leave this video discouraged. I don't want you to leave this 10-minute video and go, oh man, and bury our heads in the sand. Quite the contrary. This is why we need to speak up right now. We need to stop these anti-democratic forces. You need to share this video with everybody that you know. We need to get the word out. We need to explain why this is so critical and important right now. Our democracy is literally on the line. So this has been Mycelis from the MeidasTouch Network. Check out the MeidasTouch podcast. Search wherever you get podcasts, MeidasTouch podcast. We also just got a Patreon website, so you can check that out as well. One of the ways you've always asked is, well, how can we support independent media? Well, you can subscribe to our Patreon. Go to patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. We got some great benefits there. You could join our Discord chat. There's other benefits, and become a producer of our podcast. Check it out. Patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Check that out. And subscribe to the podcast and subscribe to this YouTube channel. Hit the subscribe button right now. I'm Ben Mycelis from the MeidasTouch Network. Thank you so much for listening.
This November is Rovember. MeidasTouch just released its brand new collection of Rovember t-shirts and pins to let the country know what's at stake this upcoming midterm election. Go to store.MeidasTouch.com to grab yours. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.